In this video, I'm going to cover a couple different ways that you can feel more prepared for podcasting on the go, because I have gone through my share of mistakes and embarrassment in doing this myself over the years. My very first podcast I started in 2016 out of my childhood bedroom. Within a year, that show helped me land my dream job coaching Fortune 1000 executives and professional athletes. And then, of course, I've also gotten to launch shows that have gone on to do over 1 million downloads and have become successful client acquisition channels. On this channel, my goal is to help people like you own your means of production, because it's something that I really wished for myself. When I first started out, I didn't have the capital or budget to be able to hire big teams to be able to do this. I wanted to learn and own my means of production. So I'm hoping that this will help you do that today. So anyway, let me dive into what made me think about this in the first place. It was really pure embarrassment, because I had landed an episode with one of the biggest podcasts in Australia at the time, and I was there for a family vacation. And so I had coordinated to be able to go and do a recording with these two hosts. It was going to be one of the biggest episodes ever, right? Basically what happens is I have a GoPro, I have a Zoom H6 at the time, I had 2 USB mics, everything that could fit into a backpack. I get there and I'm the one setting up the equipment, right? Because I don't have anybody else with me. It's just me, and I'm talking and I'm building rapport while this is going on, and I'm trying to get my computer set up, my Zoom, and it's just too much, because you're in a new environment and you are maybe the only operator. There's nobody helping you. So you have to be able to get the guests to be comfortable, but you also have to make yourself comfortable and not freak out while you are maybe dealing with some tech issues on the back end. And so I just remember the pure horror that I felt when my mic wasn't working for whatever reason. And there was this a good minute or two of awkwardness that felt like hours, where eventually the person I was going to go interview offered to use their setup. And so we were able to do that. He saved the day, which was pretty awesome. And I'm never going to forget that. But ever since that moment, I just vowed to figure out how to never experience that level of embarrassment or unpreparedness again. And so in this video, I want to help you do that, because there are nuances that you have to keep in mind when you are traveling to record your podcast. Okay, so let's start with scenario one. Okay, the first scenario is you want to bring your own equipment. Okay, because I have clients on my roster right now executing every single one of the strategies I'm about to share with you today, which is why I want to make sure not to leave out some of these and just focus on the cool one, which I will reveal to you. But let's say you want to do it the way that I did, the way that some of my clients are doing it, where they want a podcast setup that they can pack in a backpack and take with them wherever they are traveling, whether they are at a conference, whether they're traveling for work and want to squeeze in an interview, or whether they are going up to meet up with a guest specifically for this episode. So let's say you've got a portable recorder like a Zoom H6, you've got 2 microphones, and then you've got maybe your iPhone as the camera that you're going to be using if you do video. So it could be as simple as that. Okay, that could be your grab bag if you really want it to. Now, for one of my clients, they want even less space, right? They're going to be carrying some lighting with them. And so if you're going to be doing that, you want to make sure maybe the mics that you're bringing with you aren't super giant like this, right? Even though maybe this is the highest quality, you might be willing to sacrifice for portability and convenience. If that is you, I recommend checking out the DJI wireless set, right? Those are the 2 individual microphones with 1 receiver that essentially you can record directly into each of those. So each mic actually has 14 hours of internal recording time. So it replaces what you would need that Zoom H6 for, and it's just a very small wireless version of it. Now, don't get me wrong. A wired connection is typically going to yield higher quality than something that is wireless, and there's just slightly more room for error with signals and frequencies and things of that nature. But the DJI is pretty reliable, where if you're okay with using that as the mic and you're okay with the simplicity and the look that will come with it, then I think that is a wonderful option for most people. But one of the things that you're going to run into with taking your setup with you is actually having to unload it and set it up, right? So wherever you are going, you definitely want to make sure to block out some time so that you can get there early. The guest maybe is not there while you are there, or they're a little busy and you get to have some time alone to set things up, because you will feel a little frazzled, right? Especially if you're not used to setting up some of the equipment. And so you want to have your checklist of things that you can go through and make sure it's good to go before you have to do rapport building and the pre-interview vibes of whoever you might be talking to. Okay, that's setup number one. Setup number two is going to be, let's say if you are recording remotely. If you plan to do a remote recording, you're traveling for work and you also have a couple interviews scheduled, you're not going to be in your normal recording space, you're going to be maybe in a hotel room, right? In that scenario, what you are typically going to need is, at bare minimum, your laptop and AirPods. Okay. The reason I say laptop and AirPods is because, of course, it's not the highest quality, but it is sometimes what guests show up with themselves, right? And so if your guest is showing up with AirPods or AirPod Pros in a situation where maybe you don't have the ability to bring the mic and set it all up yourself in a headache-free way, the AirPods could do a passable job on your end as well. But if you want to take it a step further, you would pack the microphone that you have. And then it depends whether you are using a USB microphone or an XLR microphone. If you're using a USB microphone like the Shure M7, right, that goes directly into your computer. There's no audio interface that's actually needed, right? Versus if I decide to use this mic for a remote recording, I need to have the XLR cable that you're seeing right here, right? The other end of that is connected to an audio interface. And so the one that I recommend, I've tested several over the years, but the one I love is the Scarlett. So the Scarlett 2i2, I have the 4th generation, right? Anytime you see 3i3, 4i4, those are typically the number of inputs that you can put in there. So let's say you had a 4-person podcast and you wanted to record that in person, you could have 4 inputs. Mine has only 2, and I mostly use it for just myself here, but I would typically plug the XLR cable into the audio interface, and the audio interface has a USB connection that goes into your computer. So it's this middleman that allows the beautiful sound that can come from your high quality mic to actually come out. And if you are using something like a Shure X2U, which I did for years, I highly recommend not doing that, because if you cheap out on the audio interface part, but you have a very high quality microphone, it can really cheapen things completely, because just the sound output is not as high quality with the Shure X2U, versus I find when I'm using the Scarlett, it's making the most out of the mic that I already have. So for a remote setup, that's what I would consider. You would need to bring your audio interface with you, and you would need to bring your mic and the XLR cable or the USB mic with you as well. Lighting is going to be a consideration for the remote setup. If you're in a hotel room or something like that, see if you can get some natural light coming in, because the natural light is what helps the video quality. Sorry, not just natural, the artificial light too, but it's what helps the overall picture quality. It's not really just the nice body of the camera that you're using, which is responsible for that. Obviously, for the camera, you'll be using the built-in webcam that you probably have. If you have an extra web like a Logitech or the Opal C1 or something like that, you can obviously bring that with you, and it's pretty portable and you can plug it right in and you're good to go. I personally, if I am using Zoom, because on Riverside it doesn't work as well, but if I'm using Zoom to record, I like to use the mirroring concept from the iPhone. So if you have an iPhone, you're able to wirelessly connect to your Apple computer. And so typically I would need an extra tripod that I would set up a little bit higher than where the normal webcam would go. But essentially what this does is it gives you a very cinematic, high quality look that comes from the iPhone, but you get it in a webcam format. And I'm surprised that more people don't use this, because it's just so much easier than trying to set up your DSLR as a webcam or trying to get something super external, right? But I did say the one downside is if you are using Riverside, doing the wireless version of using your phone as the webcam does not work as well, but for whatever reason in Zoom, it does. It works perfectly fine. Now, you can also use your iPhone as the camera with a wired connection. What you would need for that is whatever, like a USB-C to USB-C, but you're going to need the software Camo. So Camo is a software. It's a couple bucks a month for the paid version, but essentially what it allows you to do with a wired connection is when you are even using things like Riverside or other types of softwares to actually record your episode, you're able to use this as an external. You're able to use this as the webcam without having to worry about wireless disruptions or lack of compatibility and things like that. So that was the remote setup, right? Now, the third setup is what I'm finding that my clients are actually using more and more, and which is why I wanted to share this with you, because it's no longer something that is just available to like the LAs and the New Yorks of the world. This is something that in every major city that you go to, you may have access to this. And so let's say that you are flying out to some place like Georgia, right? And you are going to do an episode in Georgia. You don't want to lug all of your equipment with you. You don't feel like setting it up and doing all that. You just want to show up and record. You want to be able to be your best self. And maybe this is a very high profile guest. You want to make a good impression. You don't want to have to worry about being the operator as well. So the method for this that I recommend is looking into live studios. The reason that I say live studios is because they have all of the highest quality equipment that you can think of already there. So this Shure SM7B, already there. The boom arm stand, already there. The couch that you're going to sit on, the plant that stands behind you, the red lighting, blue lighting, soundproofing, all that stuff is already there. I have a client who was a part of a major TV network, and she happens to live in LA, and in LA there's a lot of great options, obviously, because there's a lot of demand for podcast studios. And so one of the places that she's going to be recording in has a skyline view, right? It's a beautiful view. You have tons of natural lighting and things like that are coming through. And in the past, this is an option that would only be available to somebody who is super wealthy, somebody who is famous enough where it would make sense for them to invest in a big studio with expensive recording time and all that stuff. And again, it would only be available in major cities like New York, LA, maybe Miami. But now I'm finding that I have several clients who are just everyday folks all over the world, by the way, right? So international, but I'll keep it to just US, even in the US, scattered across the country. And I've had multiple people tell me that they're open to using this as a recording method, even in their hometown. So they're not traveling, right? But they are going to be recording some of their episodes in person, and they want to be able to use the live studios. And a lot of them find that this is accessible because maybe the place that you're in, the home studio that you want to build or set up, is not feasible, right? You just don't feel like going through the overhaul of building it out because it is work and it does take a bit of a budget, right? And you might still not get it to look and feel the way that you want to. So the live studio is typically designed in a way to give you all the highest quality things that you normally would want access to, including K cameras and all this crazy stuff that is just, you're going to have a tough time doing that on your own, right? It's typically operated by technicians and videographers and filmmakers and people who already had access to some of the highest quality equipment, right? They had access to cameras that are used on advertising shoots or in actual movies and TV shows, right? Guess what? That is something that they are renting out now in a way that you can get access to that quality. Now, something I want to warn you with, though, if you use this approach, each studio has their package and the deals that they offer. One thing you want to keep in mind is just knowing ahead of time, do you want to take the raw files with you? One thing you want to keep in mind ahead of time is that the cameras and everything that they're recording on are so high quality and take up so much storage. Like, Many of them you'd leave with likely a physical hard drive if you wanted the files yourself. Many times if you record in a live studio environment, there's typically a package or deal where they will do the post-production for you, right? Or they're doing live cuts for you. So while you're recording, when you talk, the camera switches to you, okay? When your guest talks, boom, they're switching the camera to them, right? Like having an actual producer in the room who is going to help oversee the entire thing. It sounds super bougie, right? And maybe in some states it is, in some parts of the world it still is, but it's becoming more and more accessible, which is great news for everyday creators because you no longer need to just have the perfect place in your house that looks worthy of a podcast. If you want that look, and a lot of times it's not even just for the look, this extra step in production value is actually because of the guest, right? So the guest that you are having on maybe may not say yes to an episode that was recorded remotely, right? Or they may not say yes to something that you're just going to film on your iPhone. But hey, if you said, oh, we're going to be recording at this studio, and they can see, okay, this is a legit studio, guess what? They're a little more incentivized and excited to do the episode and show up. Because even if you are not a big show, the fact that it was done in a professional studio gives it a stamp of approval to some extent, where people will use that as an example, right? Like they may be excited to share that with their audience, right? They may be excited to use that as a reference. Hey, you want to learn more about me? Check out this podcast I was on. And so you set yourself up to do that when you go the route of going with a live studio. Now, the other thing that you'll want to keep in mind is that you could technically do a makeshift version of this. So if you didn't want to go get studio time from an existing place, you could get an Airbnb, right? Or you could go to the guest's house or their work, wherever they invite you, and say it's cool to record, right? There are some guests where that might be more comfortable for you. You don't need to go all the way to the live studio, but you have access to an Airbnb or their house. And then what you'll do is essentially look for a local videographer or a local filmmaker, right? So somebody who is already in the city that you're going to be in, who is willing to spend an afternoon, half a day with you, essentially, to be able to operate the cameras and to be able to get you everything that you need. And the reason this is worth it in a lot of cases is because to not have to worry about the lighting, to not have to worry about setting up the camera. Oh, is it shutting off? Is it turning on? Oh, is the sound messed up halfway through? Like, you don't need to worry about any of those things when you have an operator, and you can really just focus the most on making yourself and your guest as comfortable as possible. But again, coming back to the live studio concept, sometimes you got to look at the pricing, and the rate might be competitive enough or affordable enough for you where, okay, it might be more expensive to go get the Airbnb and hire the person individually and get all the equipment together. And so the live studio just makes sense in a lot of cases. Now, the third option I want to present to you within this setup is similar to the live studio concept. You have websites that are primarily designed for filmmakers, videographers, and people who are, let's say, on high-end advertising shoots and things like that, right? You've got these $100,000 cameras, you've got insane lenses, you've got these crazy rigs, right? That stuff is hard to travel with. And a lot of times what people like to do is rent from local people who already have access to that equipment. Hey, if I'm going to be on a shoot in Chicago, right? And okay, there's going to be this big team there. All right, what equipment are we going to need? There are websites where you can actually have that stuff delivered, rented, and used for that purpose, and then sent back when you're done. So you never have to worry about flying with it or any of that stuff. There's also websites that are basically renting from peers, right? So similarly, like if you're a videographer or filmmaker in another city and you want to help that person out, they've got all this equipment that they're sitting with. If they're not using it for a shoot that day or for something else, it's a way for you to easily get access to very high quality equipment. So that is going to be dependent, I think, on your comfortability with operating and with piecing things together, right? So if you have some technical knowledge and you're comfortable operating a camera, which cameras you want, right? And you're okay with kind of taking the steps to piece this together, that route could work for you and it might be more economical. But as I mentioned before, it's becoming more and more convenient and also accessible price-wise to be able to go the live studio route. Now, every studio is different. I'm not making a blanket statement that that's just the best option. But in terms of quality and convenience, it's very hard to beat, especially if you find a good deal for being able to show up and do your thing. And also, I think makes you make the most out of that moment. The live studios are only going to get more and more accessible too, because there's more and more popping up everywhere. So you're going to have multiple options typically wherever you're at. It's just going to be about what's included in it, right? Because some people will do all of the editing for you there. Keep in mind that some of the live studios, because of the equipment that they're using, it's hard for them to maybe send you home with all of the footage and for you to manipulate it yourself. So there are certain things like that where you're going to probably get upsold into just buying the edited version or the footage that you filmed or some other thing anyways, because it's just easier probably to deal with. The only downside that I can think of, which I do want to give you a heads up for, because I have had several clients over the years who are in this boat too, which is because of how expensive studio time can be, if you are not actually in this long term, like you don't care about podcasting more than a couple episodes or making it really big, and you can't see yourself maybe doing this thing for 3 years or more, then it may not be a good idea to go the live studio route, because the live studio route is, of course, a little more money than maybe doing some of these other ways of setting it up. And if your guest is okay, the live studio route is obviously very high quality, right? It looks professional. It looks almost pixel perfect. They've thought of all the things that you would need to think about and made it headache free so you can sit down and just do your thing. Now, the trade-off that comes with is that it is more costly than just getting the equipment yourself and trying to operate it yourself. So you just want to make sure to budget in a way where, you know, that's sustainable. Because I have found with several shows that I've worked with where they started out being fully in person. Now there's this expectation of being in person. They're in this high quality studio. Now you have an expectation of being the highest quality studio. And guess what? Maybe after 10 episodes or a year, you're like, oh, I don't want to spend this much money on this. And now you're downgrading, it seems like, back into a remote setup or back into some other setup, when it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to present it that way. I think that if you have a nice mix from the beginning, you have some that are filmed in your home studio, you have some that are filmed remotely, and then guess what? You have some that are filmed in a live studio. You've now set up expectations in a way where it's a treat, right? People see it as a special event. Whoa, you got access to this big guest, or you were in this cool city, you're at this cool conference, and you're able to get these 5 people in person. That is a great balanced way to do it that I see being more sustainable for people. But of course, if you have the opportunity to land a big name guest and you are willing to go travel out to that person, or they are willing to come travel to you, it is worth it in many cases to find a studio that's local to you, find a studio that's local to them, and figure out a way to coordinate the recording so that it happens there. Because yes, you might pay a little bit more to do that, but the effect that it has can be worthwhile. Not just in terms of the final output. Yes, it's higher quality. The clips will look awesome, right? But at the same time, the impression that you have on the guest. It's like taking somebody out to a steakhouse dinner, right? If this is a client you're trying to win over, it's a really big deal. You taking them to a steakhouse dinner versus taking them through the drive-thru at McDonald's, right? Just a bit of a different vibe. And so you have to keep that in mind and make those decisions in a smart way if you find yourself landing one of those episodes. Overall, this is amazing news though for everyday creators, for bigger creators, smaller creators, doesn't matter, because this was something that was only accessible to a select few people, right? Especially maybe only if you knew somebody who had access to their own studio and they used it for their purposes. And they were like, oh yeah, sure, you're my friend. I'll let you, whenever you're in Miami, come use my studio, right? That was happening for years. But the fact that we have several options now, whether you're in Texas, whether you are in Colorado or Oregon, like all these crazy places where I have clients where I'm like, wow, I can't believe you have access to the studio. That says a lot. That says a lot about the genre and the art of podcasting and how far it has come. So I'm very happy to see it, very happy to see this being made accessible to people like us, because even though you do have to rent it, I still see it as owning your means of production, right? You understand the process, you have an option, you have a headache-free way to conduct it. And then if you have the budget, it makes the other two options that I shared seem, I don't want to do that. But again, if you don't have the budget, or if your guest, you're comfortable with them enough where, hey, we could film this in their gym, we could film this at their house, we don't need to look so flashy, that may not even be the brand of your show, right? Then, hey, the live studio option may not be for you, but consider it as a tool, as an option, because whether you use it every single time you travel, or whether you need to tap into it once or twice when that moment comes and you've landed somebody that's worth hosting in that studio, I think it can be, a worthwhile tool. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you a couple ideas on how you can think about preparing for your traveling podcasts, what's going to be convenient for you, what's going to be within your budget, and what is going to be appropriate for the level of production that you are looking to do on your show. Make sure to check out some of the free tools and all that good stuff I've got in the description below. I appreciate you taking the time, hanging out. Best of luck with you and your podcast, and I will see you on the next one.